Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Norton, and I'm the author and founder of Making Peace and Beyond. I just want to welcome you here because it does take a lot of courage, profound courage, to be willing to look at yourself and to be able to open up among others. You might be scared. You might want to run right now. Sometimes people are feeling like, why did I agree to do this? And how can I get out of here? I don't know why you're here. You may be here because somebody told you to come. You may be here because you've just gone through a really difficult period in your life and have been unable to resolve the issues involved. Or you might be here because you're just curious. But wherever you're here, I'm glad. And I pray that you would be able to receive what you came to get, even if you don't know what that is. We don't ever know exactly what God's going to do during this process. So we just pray that you would open your heart and your mind to whatever He has in mind for you. The workbook and the videos that you're about to see are filled with practical information, exercises, and questions that will help you to understand at a deeper level the impact of your past on your present, that how we are one story, and it will help to connect that story into one consistent story that we can continue to tell and grow closer to God in the process. It will also help you to understand yourself and others better and to be able to love yourself. This is an invitation, seriously, to being known and being loved. In all the work that I've ever done, I see people, almost everyone, who would like to be loved. But almost everyone I meet is also afraid to be known. So this is a chance to really risk everything for the gift of love, to give and receive it, and to be able to feel peace and joy in the presence of God. One of the things that you'll be doing is looking at just some of the ways that your past may have affected your present, the things that you've done and have been done to you. And I thank God that we have a God that it doesn't matter where we've been. It doesn't matter what we've done. It doesn't matter what's been done to us. His grace is bigger than that. He's a God of mercy and grace and forgiveness. He redeems and restores what the locusts have eaten over the years. So I do thank you for being here. Before you get started on this study, I wanted to go over some guidelines and about participation and instructions. And if you'll notice in the front of your book, you'll find a thing that says group guidelines. And I wanted to just go over these briefly and expound on them a little bit. Number one is confidentiality is essential. One of the primary characteristics of dysfunctional families is that we talk about each other and we don't talk to each other. And this is a place to break that habit. So it's not okay to talk about other people. If you have an issue with somebody, it's important to talk to them with grace and with truth. What is said here stays here. It's okay to talk about your experience, but it's not okay to talk about somebody else's. We're not here to fix, analyze, or instruct another person. So keep your experience to your personal experience. We can share our experiences. We grow by telling our own stories, not by telling each other what to do about their story. And so to be able to really understand that another person has a right to be where they are. They have a right to think what they think. And that's between them and God, not between them and you. So our job is to help each other have a safe place to work out their relationship with God in a place of love and acceptance. So please remember not to be telling others what to do. Time is valuable. Sometimes we think our story is just the greatest story on earth or the only story on earth, but everybody has a story. So remember to share the time and to stick with the material. It's really important. There's so much material in this book, and each person needs the time to share. So when you look at what time you have and you divide that up, and that's the amount of time that's there by whoever's present, that's the amount of time you have. And so when you do more than that, you're really taking someone else's time. It is important to share. If you have done the work, if you've not done the work, then you really don't know what to share. So it is really important to just listen that week, but doing the work each day is the way to get the most out of the material. There was a person who came once who said, the first time I came, I got the book. The second time I came, I read the book. The third time I came, I worked the book, and life started to change. And it does work if you work it. It does not work. You have to do the work. So this is not therapy. This is a small group self-study. And so your individual work is what you're really doing, is trying to examine yourself, the barriers, strongholds, distractions that might be preventing God's love from getting to you and your love from getting to God and to others. So if there are deeper things that you need to examine, things that are not in the material, then you may need to get some outside help. And I would really encourage you to do that. You will be stirring up some emotions and stirring up some issues and possibly some anxiety. I wish there were a way around the forest, but there's not. It's just about going through. One piece of caution is that if you do start to get anxious, pause. Think through it. Think where you are now. Think that things have you've already survived all of the stuff that's in your past. So pause and just do a fast forward and then come back to it. It's important to stay the course. You don't want to get off the table in the middle of the operation. It's really encouraged that you refrain from drinking alcohol or taking other drugs during this study. We have a tendency to want to numb our pain, numb our emotions, and tell people sometimes if you're sitting on the eye of a hot stove, the last thing you want to do is numb it out. It's telling you something. Our pain has a message, and so to really do that. We're also asking that you not initiate dating or romantic relationships with other people in the group. Women should call women, men should call men, so that everybody can focus on what they're doing here and studying and not be distracted by little flutters of the heart. So I would encourage you to do that. It's my prayer that you will find safety, hope, acceptance, encouragement, and strength during this study. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I just want to welcome you here. I think it takes tremendous courage to come into a room, to look at things you may never have looked at, and to be with people that you may not know. And so, somebody said if the bomb ever goes off, hope you're in a group like this, because if anybody survives it, we will. We don't know how to live too well, but we do know how to survive. And so this is going beyond survival. This is about really reclaiming our identity in Christ. Somebody asked Michelangelo one time, how in the world did you ever make this beautiful, wonderful statue of David, which is the most beautiful sculpture in the world, I think? And he said, oh, it was easy. I just chipped away everything that wasn't of David. And I think that's what we're here to do, is to chip away everything that isn't of God. God made us perfectly in His image. He made us to be His beloved children. And that's what we're here to reclaim. And I've never met anyone in my life who did not want to be loved, but I have met lots of folks who are terrified to be known. So what we're going to do is we're going to launch out on 10 weeks of self-introspection and learn the ability to share, to move beyond, to really understand some of the things that went into making us who we are today, and to identify some of the strongholds or stumbling blocks or distractions that keep us from really receiving the love and the freedom and the peace that Jesus went to so much trouble to give us. So I'm going to ask you to do a quick exercise of sort of getting a little bit of information about each other. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to pick a partner and to share different levels of communication. Most of us live a lot of our life on in the safe fact territory. A safe fact is something that you would share with anyone. This is cocktail party conversation. This is church lobby conversation. This is stranger on the street conversation. How about them Indians? You know, what do you think about the sun shining today? It's safe stuff that nobody's going to really have a lot of judgment about. It's stuff you could really share with anybody. So the first thing I'd like for you to share is a safe fact. So if you just turn to the person that you have chosen and share that. Okay. So the second thing is a little bit more. This is the stuff that wars are made about. This is the stuff that divides us from each other very often. It's stuff that falls into the sort of next level of stuff. One of the big lessons for me this year has been that my relationships are more important than my opinions in most cases. So to share an opinion is something that you take a stand on. And it's something that many people will die on. You know, an opinion I have is that there is no one on earth that is beyond the healing grace of Jesus Christ. That's an opinion I have. It's something I live by. So share an opinion. Okay, everybody got an opinion? Y'all still speaking to each other? I mean, so we come down to another level, and what I want you to share is a risky fact. A risky fact is something that may get judgment thrown at you. It's something about you that people may feel judgmental about, or people may have some ideas about. So a risky fact would be something like, in some groups would be, I'm a Christian. In other groups it would be, I'm a Republican or Democrat. In other groups it would be, you know, I like masks or don't like masks. But it can be something that is risky, that could bring a separation from the group you're in. So a risky fact. Another thing that we move into more of the emotional stuff, sometimes we get into, we feel angry. So sharing something that made you angry, I'm sure most of you have something that you were angry about at some point in time, but something that you were angry at. I became angry when my best friend ran off with my children's father, and I became actually enraged. But a time when you were angry. The next level, and this is getting a little more risky for us as people if we are protecting an image of ourselves, if we are avoiding being known. And that's a time when we felt guilty. Guilt is a time when you do something wrong. It's a doing thing. It's a wrong choice. And, you know, true guilt is sin. You know, when we sin, you know, guilt is one of the things we often feel. But the thing we feel guilty about, I have in my younger time, I mistreated a lot of my friends. And I betrayed a few people, and I have felt guilty about that. A time when you felt guilt. The last thing, and this is where we want to get to, because this is a time when you felt shame. Shame is a hugely powerful emotion that we'll talk a lot more about. But it's the emotion that makes us feel flawed or helpless or inadequate, dependent. It's the one we most often avoid because it's something that we are. It's not something we can change. And so that's a time, you know, there was a long period of time I was ashamed of my addiction. And you know, it brought a lot of shame, and I would avoid talking about it. So a time when you felt shame. How many of you feel a little bit closer to the person that you were talking to than you did before the exercise started? One of the things we find is that when we live up here, no one knows us. When we live up here, when we are here, people will have a certain stereotypical image of us. But when we start to come down here, we become known. Because this is often related to the facts about ourselves, the things that we are very afraid. We want to be seen, we want to be loved. We have this longing to share our story at some level, but we're afraid to. And so this is where you get to that point where you can really begin to be intimate with people. We've really corrupted the word intimacy, but what intimacy basically means is intimacy. Is I'm going to open myself to you. I'm going to share myself with you. I'm going to trust that I can be vulnerable with you and that I'm safe here. And one of the things we want to have in this place is a place of safety, is a place of confidentiality. One of the things I wanted to say is how important it is that we honor this space with each other that we have, that we really treasure the moment. You know, many of us grew up in dysfunctional families, and one of the characteristics of dysfunctional families is we talk about each other and not to each other. So we want to make sure that we are able to be with each other in truth and in grace, and give each of us a safe spot for them and God to work out their issues, and to have the capacity to look at ourselves. So does that make sense to you guys? All right. So I'm going to share a little bit about myself and how I got here, because I'm here basically in a state of awe, because I have no business being here. My life is so messed up, but I wanted you to know me. And then if you're still here, we'll learn some other things. I grew up in a really different world. It was a world of segregation. It was a small southern town, and it was a really different time in history. We had no television. We had one movie in town. We had no cell phones, no screens. Most of you cannot even envision what it would be like to grow up in a town like that, but I will tell you there was a lot of merit to it. But there was a lot my family was old family. We had been there for 150 years. My father owned a hosiery mill. My grandfather built the church I went to. My name was Howard. And I had a cousin who literally thought the Lord's Prayer, "With our Father who art in heaven, Howard is thy name." It was a very, very safe environment for me. We had help. If anybody saw the movie or the book, The Help, I grew up in The Help. I could name every character in the book. And for me as a child, I never understood why we couldn't do everything together. But the church was the center of everything, and I could not reconcile what I was learning in Sunday school with what I was seeing in the culture. And it was just I was always kind of a problem kid because I asked a lot of questions. But I thought, that if I was a good kid, my parents looked good on the outside, and we were taught to look good on the outside. We were taught, my first language was lie, because inside our house, both of my parents were alcoholic, and they both died of alcoholism. And so we had these two lives. We had the life that we lived outside and the life that we lived inside. And when we went out, we wore the right length of glove, and we wore the little hat from Miss DeBerry's, and we said, "Fine, thank you," and they said, "Fine, thank you," and we smiled sweetly, and we came home hurting. When we were in the house, I was yelling and screaming, and some physical and some sexual abuse. It was very crazy. And I got the idea that if I prayed hard enough and was good enough, that God would fix my family. And so I became the good kid. I was a straight A student. I was a Girl Scout. I'm going to see all the old people and eating milk and cookies and listening to their stories. I was 12 years perfect attendance at Sunday school. I got 12 silver dollars. We got a silver dollar. But it was, we got, so, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and my family kept getting worse, and it was terrible. And in 7th grade, my sister got sick and was bedridden. She was older than I was, and so she ran kind of a buffer for me. And my brother was young, my parents were drunk, and I was scared. And I remember thinking, I have to grow up. And growing up meant smoking cigarettes and drinking, and that's what I did, and began to gradually move away from Christ. My idea was that, I've done my part. I've been the good kid, I have prayed, I have been faithful to you, and I loved Jesus as a little girl. I mean, I was just all trusting. But when things kept getting worse, when I thought I had been so good, then I decided either you don't exist, you're impotent, or you just don't love me. But it doesn't seem that you're doing what you need to do. So I began to do my own life and try to find peace and happiness and stuff, and particularly in men and in alcohol. So I became promiscuous, and when I was 16, I got pregnant. And in 1960 in the South, in a small southern town, that was not smart. So they sent me away to an unwed mother's home, and I'd never been away from home before, and I just remember feeling terrified. That it was just, in one day, my life as I knew it went away. And so, I had a child that I was forced to give up for adoption and was told never to speak of it again. And my father, even though I know today he loved me, and in his understanding of things, which was a very strong no-talk rule, we're not going to talk about stuff that we don't like, he was doing what he thought was the most loving thing. But what he said to me was, we're going to send you to live with your cousin 3,000 miles away that you met one time. And you can't tell them while you're there, because we want you to have a normal life. And you can't have a normal life if they know about your history. And so I was set in a shame-based life that went on for the next 20 years. I lived with some cousins. They were amazing people. They welcomed me into their heart and home. They were active in the community. They were intellectual people. They were not alcoholics. They did not yell at each other. They discussed things. I remember seeing them angry and thinking, this is really weird. They're mad at each other, but they're talking about it. And I didn't know about that. And so it was a very different kind of a thing. So, but you can't get close to somebody when you're trying to live two lives. You can't let anybody in, because then they'll find out who you are. And so within just a little while, I hooked up with all the other people that were like I was, and I started partying and drinking again, and started college out there
went to University of Washington and got pregnant and had an abortion, which I always end that sentence with, thank God I have a Savior, because that was probably the worst thing that I ever did. But then came back to South Carolina, to the University of South Carolina, and I had a really spiritual awakening. I was like, I was driving down the highway and I was drunk, and I heard a voice very clearly say, turn around, if you don't, you're gonna die. And it was a voice of authority, and I know now it was God. I wasn't talking to him at the time, so I didn't acknowledge that, but I obeyed. And so I turned around and came back and got my life back together. Several months later, met the man that was to become my children's father, my husband. He was a big fraternity guy, so he did my drinking for me. And I thought, I am going to be the best wife ever. I'm going to be Miss Brady Bunch. And so I really tried, and I had no idea what to do. And I still had this, feeling that I should be grateful for somebody accepting me. And so we had 2 children, moved to Minnesota after graduation, and when my son was born, he ran away with my best friend. And I thought, there's no hope for me. I did the best I could, and once again, this has happened. Now I had a baby and a 4-year-old, finally moved back to North Carolina, and somehow, I don't know how, I went to graduate school when my daughter started first grade, and I look back on things and I think, how in the world? And there is no other answer except God was with me when I wasn't with him, but I still wasn't recognizing him at that time. So went to graduate school, and then I went to work in aging. Became state director for training in aging, which is really neat because now that I'm old, it's useful. All that stuff I learned, I know how to do it. And so I can, and so that brought me to Raleigh, and then I was asked to go and be the director of staff development for a big psychiatric hospital, one of the old asylums that was in the western part of the state. And my life I'd always been good professionally. I'd always been good in school. I'd always been able to look good. I mean, I learned from the best. I now carried my own parents' lie, but I also carried my lie. And so my professional appearance life was really good, but my personal life always stunk. I was, the people that I chose to be in relationship with were people like me who were lost. And so it was then that I thought, oh, well, now I can go work in mental health, and I will learn, how to be sane, how to change these things. And so I met a psychiatrist out there, and he was a hippie shrink. This was in the mid-'70s, and he was a really hippie shrink, and he was the person that everybody thought was the best teacher, and so I thought, well, where he tells me that something is not right, that's where I'm wrong, and so I'll just believe what he says, and then I'll become, things will work out. Well, unfortunately, he turned out to be one step crazier than I was, and we were making marijuana brownies for staff picnics, and if you think about it, this was my introduction to mental health, and in order to live on campus, one had to be a PhD, MD, or department head. And we were literally making marijuana brownies for staff picnic. I've never seen a crazier bunch of people. And, the only way we could tell the difference sometimes between the patients and us was we had keys. So it was neat. And I still have an interesting opinion about most of our mental health. But at any rate, it was really crazy, and it kept getting crazier, and I didn't know what to do. I knew I was in trouble, but I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I didn't think I could go back to church because I thought I had already failed Jesus. I had flunked Jesus, and so, I couldn't go to church, and I couldn't go to the mental health system because we were the mental health system. I mean, what are you going to do if you don't go to church, you don't go to mental health? Where else can you go? And God has always chased me around. I mean, He has been so persistent, like the hound of heaven in my life. But I went to the pharmacy one day, and there was a woman from Community Mental Health I had worked with, and she said, I have a job for you. And I was still trying to make this crazy marriage work. I'd quit work, and I knew I had to do something. But I said, I turned it down. She said, it's alcoholism in the family. And I probably laughed. But I turned it down, and I said, I'm not interested, especially until fall, because we're doing stuff this summer. And so her boss called me that night and said, if you'll take the job, I'll hold it for you till fall. And I said, no, I don't want it. Just give it to somebody else. And so this went on for 4 months. They changed the job. They let me do it my way. They did whatever they did. And 4 months later, things had gotten to the point where I knew I just had to do something. So I took the job. And the first thing they did was send me to Minnesota to the first family alcoholism program in the country. And it was life-changing. And the first words that was said was, every kid of an alcoholic knows what Christmas Eve is like. And they started talking about times in your life that are supposed to be special, or times when you're hurting, that you get hurt worse or you get abandoned. And I was like, my ears perked up, and it was like, really? You got a camera in my house? And it just went on from there. And then they said the second child, if it's a female, is likely to be a teenage pregnancy, and I just lost it. I mean, it was like, all of a sudden, they could put what happened to me on a board. And I began to understand what was going on, and came back just the beginning of hope. I think it was a rebirth of hope. And that's one of the things I like about what we're getting ready to do now, is I watch hope be reborn in people. Hope that we'd lost, but for me it was that day. And came back and ended up just being a zealot. I ended up running a 5-county substance abuse program, had a social setting detox. I went to started the first program for youthful offenders in prison, my baby felons, and started the first student assistance program in the state, and started running all over the place, being asked to speak, and it was just like, I was just really, there's a lot of hurting kids out here. I just need to tell them what's going on, and that there is a way back. There is a way back. And about a year or so into that, I realized one day how many times somebody who was Christian had shown up in my life to open a door, to close a door, to make a way, or to block a way. And so I thought, God, you never left me. I left you. You've been here the whole time. You have had my back. And so I went back to Howard Memorial, and when my grandfather built the church, he put extra supports on the third pew of the left, because he was a really fat man, and so he put extra supports there. And so I used to sit there beside my grandmother, and who was the safest person in the world for me. And she had ugly hands like mine. I'd push her veins down, and see if I could get the blood to stop running. And I just went and sat in the third pew on the left and said, I'm here. And I felt like I had finally come home. Something reconnected. And it was an incredible experience for me. It was the safe place again. There was peace in it. And so God, in His knowing how stubborn I am, moved me back to Raleigh, and I was state director for youth treatment, youth substance use treatment for the state. And the State Baptist Convention asked me to do some workshops for pastors. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Do you know who I am? And so I did a 2-year series of weekends for pastors up back and forth across North Carolina. And in doing that, it forced me to go into Scripture in a way that I had not since I was a child, and God has His purpose. And then some of the pastors wanted the weekend in their church. And so I started doing them in churches. Well, in the meantime, my daughter, who at 13 would not bring her friends home because she was so ashamed of the way I was living, had grown up and married an amazing man, a pastor, and they had taken a small church in New Jersey. And so they asked me to come and do a weekend for them. And I said, is there anything you don't want me to talk about? Because you know how I am. And they said, you know, just be who you are. Jesus has done such a work in your life that we just want you to be, you are such an example of what he could do. We just want you to be yourself. And so we started doing weekends in New Jersey, and then they moved here to Cleveland, and started doing weekends in Cleveland, and I kept getting encouraged to move up here, and I'd come up here, and people would say, oh, we're praying for you, you're going to move to Cleveland, and I'm like, I'm not moving to Cleveland, you know. I mean, and then 9/11 happened, and that got me, and it was, so Jonathan called and said, would you please move closer to us? We really want you closer. We don't know what all this means. And so I moved up here, up to Cleveland in 2002, and have been here ever since. Closer to my grandchildren who have now grown up and left. I thought that was pretty tacky. And, you know, it was, you know, and my son is now here. He did his own journey around running away and found God again. And so we're here, and I have loved the work that God has given me to do. Everything that has happened to me has fit back together, and I truly believe that he uses all things for our good and his greater purpose as time goes by. And I truly trust that now. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm looking forward to sharing some time with you, and we'll get started.